To kick off today's episode, I want to draw a line between Klick Health and AC/DC. Don't worry, dear listener. I know what you're thinking. You're probably asking yourself, what possible connection could there be between the second largest firm on MM+M's Agency 100 list and one of the greatest hard rock bands of all time? Well, here's my answer. Perseverance in the pursuit of greatness. Just over 50 years ago, AC/DC told listeners that it's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Klick knows a thing or two about that, having been founded nearly 30 years ago and steadily growing into the medical marketing behemoth it is today. The crowning achievement of that grind came at the end of last month, when Klick nabbed a pair of major honors at Cannes, including Healthcare Network and Healthcare Agency of the Year. This marks a capstone achievement for an agency already enacting plans on continuing to expand its reach and capabilities. They've done this by acquiring fellow A100 honoree Oxford PharmaGenesis. It is indeed a long way to the top, but the view has never looked so good for Klick. This week, we're joined by Andrea Lillis, SVP and Executive Creative Director for Klick Health. Andrea served on the Pharma Lions jury, so she offers us an inside look of her work as a judge, details her time celebrating Klick's big wins, and outlines what comes next for the Toronto-based agency. As for our trend segment, we're talking about the FDA's decision to allow Zyn nicotine pouches to be marketed as less harmful to human health than cigarettes. This episode is taking place live in the MM+M studio. So glad to be joined by Andrea from Klick. Andrea, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
I'm glad not only that you're in person, you said it was your first podcast. So for any listeners out there that have anything critical about Andrea, keep that to yourself. She's going to do a great job here.
Fingers crossed.
Exactly. Beginner's luck, all that sort of stuff. But that's not the reason we have you on here. The reason we have you on here is because, one, you're part of what I told you offline is probably the hottest agency in the business right now, Klick Health. But the other one is too that you were a juror at Cannes. That's where I want to start the conversation before we talk about everything that's going on at Klick. Talk to me a little bit about your experience being on the pharma jury at Cannes. Was this your first time at Cannes? Or?
This is not my first time at Cannes, my first time on a jury at Cannes. And it's one of the most amazing experiences that I think a creative can go through. It's been a goal of mine for almost a decade. So when I got the email from the festival, it was a very humbling moment. And I put a lot of pressure on myself over the 2 days in the jury room, because I feel like at Cannes Lions especially, you have a responsibility going into the jury to set the standard, set the bar for the work for the next year. Mm-hmm. I've been a student of the festival, and after the awards are given, you go back to your agency and you sit there and you comb through Love the Work and you see what won Grand Prix, what won gold, silver, bronze, and you use that as inspiration. So I think that we had such an amazing opportunity to help set the stage for creative in pharma for the next year, the next few years.
It's interesting when we had Chris Charles on here from 21 Grams of Real Chemistry, one of your fellow jurors, he had said the same thing. He's like, one, he had that holy shit moment of like, oh, I got selected to be on here, but then the pressure that comes with it and stuff. And I'm curious, like, we just got done with the judging for the MM+M Awards, which, special plug for the listeners, those will be out about this time next week. So keep an eye out for the short list. But obviously people take a lot of pride and responsibility that you talk about there. Like, how do you prepare yourself for that? Are you looking back at like the work from the past couple of years? Are you looking at the stuff that's been released over the year? Like, how do you go into Cannes being like, I'm fully prepared to like dive headlong into this for 2 days?
Well, first of all, you have to watch about 200 in pharma, 200 case films before you even step foot in the jury room. Yeah. So you're kind of prepped. And I think that in that process for myself, it's a very like blink observation moment, right? So you're watching these case films, and sometimes brands will enter into 10, 15 different categories. So it gets a little repetitive, but I watch them all and I sort of marinate on them. And then the ones that I keep remembering are the ones that I'm excited to talk about with my fellow jurors when I get there. So I think that was the prep, like just immersing myself in all of the case films and not thinking about it, and then waiting for those things to kind of pop into my mind as I'm walking into the office or just doing daily activities. So it was steeping myself in the work that would be discussed.
I like that. I like that comparison to tea and everything like that. Talk to me a little bit about actually being in the jury room too. Like you do all this prep work, then you're in there, and it's not only obviously you're there with Chris and some other North American, but there's people from all around the world who have a whole different perspective. I remember reading Madden's recap, and I think Chris had made the point where he's like, yeah, people didn't, about the Novartis campaign, they didn't understand what a tight end was if you live in Argentina or the Philippines or something. So like, what was that dynamic of working with kind of the international coalition there?
Yeah, it was really cool because our eyes were open to a lot of different things. Like the gold winner for Make Love Last for Viagra was based in
Which was
China.
a really interesting.
Absolutely love that campaign. But you know, and that was one of the ones that I think unanimously rose to the top, but there was a lot of cool discussion about, you know, the Asian markets, what it needed to take to get something like that approved in China. And then there was also another idea that won bronze for a pharmacy called Tata MG in India. So there was a lot of discussion around like, oh, okay, in those types of markets, what does it take to get the supply chain of a medication through? Like, how is that hack valid? So it was very cool to have these conversations with jury members from around the world, because I feel like us as North Americans don't get that experience as much. So it was very cool to have conversations that went deeper than just creativity in general.
It's got to be a little eye-opening too. Like I talk with, you know, people that are based in the US all the time, and it's like, oh yeah, we're dealing with the FDA and we're dealing with our MLR process and everything like that. And then you're talking with somebody who's like, say from Thailand, you're like, oh, so this is like what your go-to-market and commercialization stuff, that's got to be a completely eye-opening experience, but also like, hey, how can we take some of those lessons and apply it to some of the stuff that we're doing here?
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the conversations that we had around Make Love Last, because, you know, unlike in the United States, in China, they can't market to consumer, period. And they can't even talk about their product. So it was inspiring.
Kind of a tough challenge there when you put those.
Tough challenge, right? So it was very inspiring to see an idea that could solve for both of those problems while still being incredibly beautifully executed from a creative perspective and also a cultural perspective. You know, the product is for MD. Everyone knows what Viagra is, but the way that they creatively solved the relationship, like it wasn't just for men. And we had a beautiful discussion about this in the jury room. You know, it spoke to men's pleasure, but in the way that they filmed the couple together, the way that it was written, it also talks about female pleasure. And we really loved that about it for a creative solution and a gold winning creative solution. So
I think it's interesting too. Like one of the things that stands out to me when I think about like different men's health campaigns that we've covered, whether it's for, I think Viagra is kind of that same thing. And trust me, like I've been raised in that whole era. I remember like seeing the blue little pill, and it's on every late night monologue, and it's Bob Dole and everything. But then to be able to reframe it in a way where it's like, no, we're taking the woman's perspective in that too. I think about with the stuff that we've covered about, say, Peyronie's disease or prostate cancer, where it's like, oh yeah, it's affecting the man singularly, but then there's the ripple effects of like the other people in their lives. And I think that was a really beautiful way that they took it in a creative sense. You know, something's been on the market for 30 years. And it's like, well, what if we reimagine it from this perspective? And obviously you all agree with that in the jury room too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that also speaks to like the ongoing inspiration, right? So all of the creative teams who are working in those types of disease states are now going to look at this as a benchmark and think about that as they continue to evolve their own creative. Like, okay, so sure, this is for men's sexual health, but how can it's also for partners. How can we weave different perspectives? And I think that that's like a beautiful longevity to awarding great creative work.
I want to talk a little bit more about the work that you saw too. And like, again, I was not surprised when I saw Novartis won. When they first pitched us that under embargo and we covered it ahead of the Super Bowl and everything, like just brilliant idea. Execution was there. It's obviously had a long tail too. So I wasn't surprised by that. What did you also notice in terms of maybe some of the other winning work or nominated work that stuck out to you in terms of like different thematic elements or trends?
So, I mean, humor was a big one. We won't talk about it too much because Novartis, Relax Your Tight End was beautiful humor. Even the Make Love Last had humor in like a really subtle, elegant way. I think that simple hacks also were spoken a lot. So the silver awarded piece was the Safe Pack for 2 Pharma 365 in Madrid. And we loved that in the jury room because it was an innovation that had nothing to do with AI, nothing to do with technology or digital anything. It was simply setting up a problem in Spain. People who are getting their prescriptions filled, the way that the packages are, they all look the same. The brand names are all the same. So a person doesn't know if they're taking their diabetes medication or their heart medication. So what if we created a simple design sleeve that the pharmacist could just pop on top of the box so that when John goes home to take his medication, he knows to take the diabetes one at 2:00 in the afternoon and the heart one at right before bed. So it was just a very simple solution that wasn't expensive, that wasn't overproduced, that helped save people's lives. People could no longer need to die from taking the wrong medication. So, innovation in a way that was so simple, wasn't overly expensive, was huge for us in the jury room.
And I know that's something that I get a lot too when people are like, oh, you're a journalist, what do you cover? And I say medical marketing. They're like, oh, those ads you see on TV and stuff. I'm like, that's the lion's share of it. And obviously there was the Super Bowl ad and, the different DTC stuff. But that's one where it's like, this is medical marketing at its most practical and basic. Yeah. And it's good to be able to see that work awarded too, because it's like, yeah, that has just as much value, if not more, than say if I see this plaque psoriasis drug while I'm watching, the NBA finals or something like that. It's really cool to be able to see like, oh yeah, this is something that is effective and gets honored in such a way.
Yeah. And it was one of those things that was so simple that everyone was kind of saying, haven't we thought of this before? Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of that coming back. It's just half the value of going to Cannes. I want to talk to you. You brought up AI, and it wouldn't be a conversation that I've had in the past, 4 years where AI doesn't come up in some sort of way. What was, from the work that you looked at, like, what was your impression in terms of AI's impact? I know a lot of people, as I was going into it, were like, we're going to see how many people actually use it. And it's under consideration. Like, did that actually amount to anything in the jury room? Did that come up a lot?
Honestly, a lot of the work that rose to the top did not have a heavy hand in AI. And, just recently, the Academy Awards came out with a huge press release saying that they would never award creative and movies that used AI to develop the work. And I think that we kind of all had that as like a little bit of an undertone too. So it was very intentional. Like if AI was used in a certain instance and it felt intentional to the creative, intentional to the storytelling, then it made sense. I don't think we looked at a single thing that was just like, oh, AI created this whole piece, So I think that the way that agencies and creatives are using AI into the future needs to always be used as a tool to support a creative idea that a human came up with. Because, AI is looking to the past. Anything that you generate with AI has already happened, and AI is just aggregating and spitting out new things. Humanity is unexpected. Creatives are going to be able to come up with unexpected ideas into the future. So I think that there always has to be some sort of human element and a human manipulation of AI to create good creative work.
I love the way that you put that. And I think it goes back to talking about the humor that you saw in a lot of these things. It's so interesting when I talk with creatives because they're like, we want pharma to be more funny, but then it's like, but we don't want it to be like laugh out loud, like we're making fun of the patient or disease state. But it's like, that's also something that AI just can't do. If we've seen any example of these different platforms, you can't get ChatGPT to tell you a joke. And it's like, why would you then put that in an ad?
Right. And especially because pharma has been so traditionally cheesy that you could say if AI is going to be funny, they're just taking a look at all of the cheesy stuff from the past and regurgitating that, right? So I think that humor, I love the way humor in pharma resonated this year because it was subtle and elegant and very well done. And I mean, there were some pieces that we saw that used humor and you were just like, no. So I think that, with us humans continuously putting our lens and, we all know what's funny, what makes us truly laugh, to continue to use that lens moving forward and evaluating humor in pharma, I think is going to be crucial.
I did love what you were pointing out there where it's like, oh, it's looking to the past. And the first thing that popped in my head for whatever reason was like a third bathtub on the beach, like overlooking the ocean, those old Cialis commercials. So it's like, that's free for any listener out there too that wants to go and pitch that. Please give me credit, Jack O'Brien. I wanted, if there's anything else too, because I want to talk a little bit about obviously how Klick did at Cannes, but like, is there anything else from the jury room that you think is important for our listeners, your peers to keep in mind as they're looking ahead to Cannes 2027. We've talked about the AI and the humor aspect. I know that craft is a big focus going into, is like kind of as a reaction to AI, is like really honing in on the craft of certain work. But is there anything else that, you know, comes to your mind in terms of trends?
I mean, I think that there's a huge opportunity in pharma now. I think that across the board, again, specifically, we noticed a lower level of entries. And in pharma, I think that that's an opportunity to truly, you know, as a creative myself, working with your strategy partners, your account partners, your client partners on really pushing the work to be something that everyone views as award worthy, submit to really help continue to push the bar in pharma moving forward. So I just want to see more work.
Which was, if there was a criticism that Jameson had, and he talked about it when he sent us a dispatch on the ground and when we had it on the podcast last week, is that the bar elevated. The work was definitely more quality than it was last year, but he'd even said it was harder to find. There weren't as many submissions, and he was kind of disheartened in that way. You don't seem to be as disheartened, but just more of acknowledging that's the state of play. Yeah,
that's the state. And it made me excited to come back to work after being in France because, you know, if you go now to Love the Work and you look at all the winners, you can kind of as a creative see, okay, there are holes in creative data. Maybe there's even holes in innovation. I know that the Simple Pack won in innovation, but like what else could we be doing? So I think that it's just an opportunity for all of our clients and creatives and strategists to really like look at the work and see, okay, well, maybe there's an opportunity in this space that we can play and to really push our clients to go there.
It's good to see that as a form of encouragement rather than just being like, oh, it's the dour state of affairs. So that's good to know. And on the opposite of dour, I should have a word here because I'm the word guy, but I don't. The best case scenario, the euphoria that was experienced by Klick. Talk to me about taking home both healthcare agency and network of the year, because that's
independent
of the
year. Yes, thank you. No.
We can go down the run sheet of all the awards, but what was that like? I mean, those are two that I know had been on the bulletin board for a while of like, we want to get those. Same night.
I mean, it was a very interesting experience this year because going into Cannes, we were all so incredibly proud of the breadth of work that the agency had done up until this year, that all of us didn't have really much anxiety. We didn't know what was going to happen. We did not expect this, but we just felt so proud and awarded in general of the work that, you know, we had submitted and the work that we had done for our clients over the last year, that we were content. So this was just cherry on top. And I think, you know, working with my team and everything that Rich Levy has done at Klick Health over the last 6-7 years has been instrumental in getting the agency to where it is. We're all so humbled and proud and just really love one another and the work that we're doing. This is like so true. We all just love each other. That it's just a product of that. It's a product of that trust, that great relationship that, you know, Rich and the senior leadership team has kind of created this beautiful space for us. And it's a product of that.
So what is that? Like, I think back to like when we won the Neil Award back in April, and that had been something that I had been aspiring to for a number of years and being like, thank you. It's similar to the fishing conversation we had offline, but no, it's one of those things that like, I remember getting it and it's kind of like the dog that finally catches the mailman where you're like, oh wow, I did it. And then you're like, whoa, like what was that initial reaction for you where it's like, oh, like we won this? Like, is it immediate, like just yay? Is it like shock? Like where do you go?
It was extreme excitement. There were tears shed. And then, you know, there were a small group of us who knew the news. And I guess I can tell this story. Rich had made the decision to not tell everyone who was there with us. So until we were all sitting there and, you know, they start to announce, okay, agency of the year is coming up. And we kind of look around and being able to see the surprise on all of our peers sitting there was like a beautiful moment as well. And then we get up on stage and we're like, okay, yay, take the picture. And we turn around and then there was a small group of us who were like, but wait for it. And like they had us turn around. So it was just like a beautiful moment of celebration, and coming together. And yeah, it was a really, really beautiful day for everyone at Klick.
When did you get to bed that night, if you got to bed?
Oh God, we were talking about this on the way here. Late. We had a great celebratory dinner after. There were sparklers and toasts, singing. There's always Backstreet Boys singing for some reason in our group. So it was really good. It was funny. You know, I had people calling me. We're sitting there after we won. I have WhatsApp calls coming on my phone. It was from people in New York and Toronto. So it was a great global moments, I think, for the agency.
That's awesome. You had the Backstreet Boys playing, and I'm glad that our podcast producer was able to dress up in character for you as well. That's just for you.
The tips, the highlighted tips.
You want to tell the listener before we?
Yeah, just so it makes sense. I can't turn my camera around, but yeah, I guess I frosted my hair because my wife frosted my twin 7-year-old's hair. So I wanted to be a part of the boys club.
Yeah, see,
that's it.
And he looks dashing as ever. And he's a great podcast producer to boot too. So that's a little sidetrack there. But wanted to also ask you too. So like you have all this. And I guess it's different. Like if I'm thinking about it from a strategic or a business perspective, it's like we have all this but like you're from the creative bend. And so it's like, it's nice to have these accolades, nice to be recognized and have all those honorariums. But like, where do you then go from there? How do you take that momentum and say like, okay, it's not pressure that I'm trying to live up to, but it's more of like a validation of the work that I've already done. Like, how do you actually take that into the future?
As I mentioned, there's a huge opportunity in the pharma space, and it's really now coming back to our creative teams, taking the momentum of this win to spread that to everyone at the agency. You know, how can we talk to our clients about the great place that Klick is right now, inspire them with the work, inspire them with the great storytelling, some of the personal stories that we've, won for with our clients over the years, and how that can help even the niche storytelling within the disease states that we work for. So I think that there are multiple levels of how to engage clients in the excitement and momentum to make them hungry for it as we creatives are. Mm-hmm. And I think that, anyone who comes back from Cannes has this like fire inside of them. And that's the great opportunity of going. And, Klick is a very special agency that they invite all different disciplines. Like it's not just creatives that go. And I think that that's special because it helps unite our strategy partners, our medical partners, our account leads on ways to talk to clients that get them equally as excited. So that we're all driving towards more impactful work.
Absolutely. And again, it's been the culmination these past couple of weeks of obviously the honors at Cannes, number 2 on the MM+M Agency 100, one of the 2 agencies that are over $700 million in revenue, which is very impressive. And then obviously acquiring Oxford PharmaGenesis, a fellow A100 honoree. Like there's just so much going on there at Klick. And so I was so glad when, we were able to put this podcast together to be able to have somebody from the agency come on the show. All of this said, we've talked a lot about Klick and your work and everything at Cannes. I'm always interested because I haven't been to Cannes in terms of favorite memories outside of the actual work of it all. And I'm curious if there's something in terms of, a party, a celebrity encounter, networking, like what stands out to you when you're looking at like I wasn't working, but I was at Cannes and this is a great memory I have.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I've had an extremely amazing opportunity to visit the festival. This, I think, was my 5th year. And every time I go, it's a completely different experience. I think one of the best is that it's a truly global gathering place. So we are all able to meet with our production partners and other agency people that are, working in Spain or working in Singapore, or working all over the place and kind of come together. So that's one really amazing aspect of it. Everyone is there for creativity. So it's just a communal place to get together and nerd out with your peers too. And it's a celebration. I mean, I think that so often we all get lost in the drive of like, okay, we need to be doing all of this work. Our bar is set so high that none of us really take the time to like enjoy that success with one another. So I think that maybe that's my favorite part is, quietly sitting at the dinner table. The champagne has been flowing, the sparklers have come, and I look across, this is going to make me tear up a little bit. I look across the table to some, fellow colleagues. This is their first time at Cannes. Mm-hmm. And I can see them getting that fire, that drive, and maybe they haven't won a gold yet, but they bring that back with them. And like, I see my younger self in them, and just like the beauty that competition and creativity can have on people who really want to do great things for human health. Mm-hmm. I think that that's like such a beautiful thing. So watching some of my younger peers really sit in the moment and sort of seeing them digest it is really inspiring and a beautiful place and a fortunate place for me to be. So I think that that's my favorite memory.
That's such a thoughtful sentiment to share. I was expecting what I've heard from other people where it's like, oh, I saw Kevin Durant at the Spotify beach party or something like that.
I did.
That's such a nicer way of looking at that time spent. But
I did get to meet Hoda Kotb for a very brief amount of time.
Shout out Hoda.
Yes. Which was very, very cool. And I saw her and I was like, oh, my mom would be so impressed if I took a picture with Hoda. And the colleague I was with, he was like, go up and introduce yourself. And I was like, okay. So I did. And she was so nice and took a picture with me. So there's my celebrity moment, Hoda Kotb from the Today Show.
my wife has worked for NBC for going on 10 years now and has always said that you see people on TV and it's one way or another off camera. She's like, Hoda is the nicest person ever. So I'm glad that was
she was so nice.
A universal feeling.
And apparently Rich and Bernardo and I had lunch at the same place that Oprah Winfrey was. That was also, I was like trying to look through the brush to see her, but I didn't want to be too creepy for Oprah.
That was my entire LinkedIn feed, was just like everyone taking their little cell phone videos from the gallery of Oprah. So that was wonderful. We're going to wrap the conversation here. It's been wonderful not only having you on the pod, but having you in studio. This is also my always reminder to any of the listeners that if you're ever looking to come on the pod, always appreciate it in person. It's always better that way.
Awesome.
Not that we don't enjoy doing it over Riverside, but all this has gone on. It's been a wonderful time being at Klick. What's next?
Oh God, what's next? I think, continuing to just do really important, meaningful work for our clients, digging in to use some of the work that we have won now in the past couple of years to inspire more client-driven work. So we're really excited. As you mentioned, this is a great time for Klick, and I think we're just going to keep the momentum going.
Awesome. Well, this has been a wonderful podcast. Your first one in the book.
My first.
It only gets easier from
Jack.
here. So thank you so much for coming to the studio, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
For our trend segment, we end up usually talking about the FDA and how it affects prescription drugs and medications and all that sort of stuff. But today we're going to talk about the FDA and how it affects something else that's tangentially in our coverage area, which are Zyn nicotine pouches. Big announcement that came out last week in terms of the FDA allowing 20 of them to be marketed a certain way. And Bella, I kind of want you to set the stage a little bit for our audience in terms of why we're talking about this, because I think there's some real implications for medical marketers and just the general public from a public health perspective. But what's the major takeaway here?
Yeah, so the FDA has allowed these 20 or so Zyn products to have a sort of modified risk label, which states that they're using them is less dangerous than smoking cigarettes. And so Zyn, now these products are the only ones on the market that are allowed to market themselves that way. And, it's been seen as a big win for Philip Morris because,
which is one of the major tobacco companies of yesteryear.
Yeah. And for their product to be the only one to have this modified risk label is kind of a big deal for a market that's not all that crowded right now. Like Zyn is really the big player.
And we'll get into more of that in terms of what it means for that market and all of that. But Matt, I want to ask you a question because you're the only one here in the room that can, I think, other than Fitz, our podcast producer, say that he grew up in the era where there was Marlboro Man, there was Joe Camel. Like you could watch TV and see a tobacco ad, which is just crazy to me. What is your reaction to seeing the Zyn announcement come out or see that they're going to not necessarily go back on TV, but have a little more marketing freedom to them?
I don't know. I think the whole thing's kind of silly. It's like this highly addictive product that they're saying, this is safer than smoking cigarettes. Well, so is sticking a fork in an electrical outlet. You might not die, but you will eventually die from smoking cigarettes. And nicotine is highly addictive. And it causes have you ever had one?
I've never had it.
So it's like having 4 shots of espresso all at once. Mm-hmm. It's, it gives you this huge burst of energy, but it does that, not burst of energy, but like you get amped up.
The head high that comes with it.
Yeah. But it comes from, a big spike in your blood pressure. It's not exactly a good thing. Mm-hmm. And it's really not a good thing for the brains of people whose brains are still developing. Namely people under the age of 25. And this is a big thing in the broverse, right? So sure, go ahead, take your nicotine. It's safer than smoking cigarettes. So is running in traffic and juggling chainsaws.
And Bella and I were talking offline with our intern Lola, who is obviously the youngest member of our team, about that. And she said that, you couldn't go to any parties, any bars or anything without people, packing a lip or something like that. And there is a little bit of a difference too. Like I grew up in upstate New York, chewing tobacco was very popular up there. And there's something kind of gross, the spitting in a cup and whatever, different when it's like nicotine pouches and it's very sleek and all that sort of stuff. Bella, I'm curious just what you make of that, where it's like, we've had this thing that's been around for a while. Obviously, cigarette smoking has its own connotations and where you fall in that spectrum. But like, yeah, there is something to like, you pop it out, you can put it in your pocket. It's very discreet. And now they're going to have a little bit more flexibility with being able to go to market with that.
Yeah. I mean, it all feels like the exact same thing as the Juul fiasco to me, because I feel like it was when I was in high school and then going into college, like Juuls, yes, were a better alternative to cigarettes, but then got a whole sector of the market, I guess we can call them population, into smoking. And then, were ultra concentrated and you could smoke them in class and be under the radar and, at restaurants and all sorts of stuff like that. And so, the misuse, and especially the misuse that's possible via like, more discreet packaging, or with the Juul, it was sleeker, it's rechargeable, things like that. The risks are just really high there, I think.
I'm always curious about that too, because it feels like we're just kind of reinventing the wheel the same way they're like, we have these streaming platforms. So we're basically reinventing cable television at this point. Like we are reinventing smoking is now vaping. Mm-hmm. You're able to use Zyn instead of using, chewing tobacco. It doesn't mean that you're reducing your risk of cancers that come along with these products too.
No, but there's a fundamental, I remember reading this, a quote from the poet Jerry Garcia in Rolling Stone one time, like back in the 80s, where he said, there's a fundamental human need to alter your consciousness. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes you can do that through meditation. Sometimes you can do it through exercise, but it's typically easier, more convenient, and let's face it, more fun to do it with substances, right? So, we're kind of wrapping that pleasure seeking in a different banana leaf, but it's kind of just people are, haters are going to hate and smokers are going to smoke. They're going to want to do it. But, you asked me earlier about, you pointed out, thankfully, kindly,
subtly,
that I'm the oldest one here. I do remember when there were cigarette ads on television. Mm-hmm. I'm that old. I think it stopped in 1969 or 1970, but I can remember the Marlboro man riding his horse and, with a heater in his mouth, So it happened. And then, it got that, so that stopped, but it was still allowed on billboards and it was still allowed in print ads. And I worked at Sports Illustrated, and there would be cigarette ads adjacent to articles about track and field, or football or baseball. I mean, it was kind of funny. I mean, these billboards were all over baseball stadiums for cigarettes and race cars. Whatever NASCAR calls its signature event now, for the longest time, was the Winston Cup, mm-hmm. Winston cigarettes, and that's been cut back. So, whether they enforce bans on advertising for these products remains to be seen, I guess. I mean, you can advertise Zyn. Not going to give you lung cancer, but it is highly addictive. I don't know.
And there's the risk of like oral cancers and esophageal cancers. Like there's a whole other set where, again, to the same point that Juul basically came out there and they're like, oh yeah, you're not going to run into the same issues as if you smoke a cigarette and you're going to look cooler doing it. It's like, well, there's still, you don't know what's in a Juul cartridge, like those chemicals and everything, like that's its own risk that you run across. But I think you bring up an interesting point too, talking about being in the bro-verse. And like, this was something I was looking back the last time that we wrote about Zyn was the start of 2024. Chuck Schumer, when he was Senate Majority Leader, had come out there saying like, oh yeah, the FDA and the FTC should crack down on Zyn. And there was this immediate, they called it the Zynsurrection, this immediate backlash from a largely conservative, barstool, bro sector of America saying like, no, this is, and it's intrinsically linked. And I can't sit here and speculate, and I don't really care that much about palace intrigue about whether the Trump administration putting its thumb on the scale, but it does kind of run counter to the Maha movement too, where it's like, this is all about clean living and all this sort of stuff. And now it's like, oh, well, you can have your Juuls, you can have your Zyns, like that. You do run headlong into that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's really interesting and reading sort of about what's in the zeitgeist about this. It feels like there are big medical bodies that are like, this is bad because like this FDA decision is bad because it's likely to increase use by young people that are underage. But there's also like a section of like the public health world that's like, this is important harm reduction. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a fair point. Because
people otherwise would be using chewing tobacco.
So this really, it is a form of harm reduction. I like we talked about earlier, I think it's just all going to distill down to the same way that Juul did, which is that eventually people are like, is mango inherently a juvenile? I don't know. Like
cotton candy. I mean, that was the argument that they've been having for years too.
Yeah. Mint Juul pods, the whole fiasco around that. But yeah, it's interesting to see sort of the divide between like scientific bodies even, or like public health authorities.
And you make a really good point. It is a form of harm reduction, right? But think about it. If certain substances were introduced now, like just created, that didn't exist before and they're just being created, would they be approved? Would caffeine be approved? Caffeine is highly addictive. I'm here to tell you, caffeine is highly addictive, right? Would caffeine be approved? And I see people at gyms and sporting events popping a Zyn to get jacked up before they work out. In the same way that if you go to a bike race, you'll see like most trailers at bike racers have espresso machines in them. So it's legal. It's not a banned, nicotine is not a banned substance. It's a watched substance, in the same way that caffeine is, but it's not illegal. But it is like, there is a very slight performance enhancing aspect to it. And that's healthier, I suppose, if you're going to do this, to pop one of those things before you go lift than, having a Camel Straight.
Can I ask you a follow-up question too? Like having grown up in the era where you were exposed to that, and I think about the same way when I see like pictures of like what Times Square used to look like in the 70s. And it's always the thing that stands out to me is like, oh, big Marlboro ad over like, Port Authority or something like that. And then you've obviously raised children who are now young adults and stuff. And I wonder, because I'm sure Bella, you were similar in the same way. Like it was a very dare centric upbringing for me. Where it's like we would have assemblies and it's like it was very scolding and all that sort of stuff. And I do think that kind of almost gives it more of the flash and the rebellious streak of like, oh, like cigarettes have this reputation, or drinking or smoking pot and whatever. And like, I'm just curious about like, I'm sure there are a lot of parents that are probably navigating that now where it's like, oh yeah, not only is that all there, but it's now these sleeker models of these vices we've known forever. Like, what do you make of that from a public health perspective in terms of towing that line?
There's always a percentage of the population that's going to say like, risky behavior, sign me up. Right. Especially in the aforementioned undeveloped brain population. But I don't ever recall seeing the Marlboro Man or the word Marlboro on the side of a race car and thinking like, that's for me. That's going to make me go smoke. That wasn't the way it worked. And I don't think that it was the advertising necessarily that made young people want to rebel. It's the fact that people will, to your point, scolding them. I mean, I can remember I'm old enough that I also remember going to the first couple of years of DARE, like that kind of harm reduction stuff. And there was, a fair amount of eye rolling at it. Like, it's sort of like Tipper Gore getting up and saying, don't listen to Twisted Sister. It's like, it was a boon for record sales. So, if you tell young people not to do something, there's a certain population that's always just going to go out straight out and do it. So even saying like, hey, it's okay to have Zins, and their parents will say like, oh, you still shouldn't do it. It's still bad for you. There are a certain number of kids who are just going to go out and do it no matter what anybody says.
I'm curious about you on the other end of the bell curve too. Like, trust me, I remember having those dare speeches and people are like, oh, you might not even like the taste of alcohol. Meanwhile, my last name starts with O apostrophe. And I was like, yeah, maybe I won't like alcohol. And it's like, bourbon tastes pretty good. But like, I'm curious how you navigate that too, because there is this kind of very heavy handedness that came with the replacement of what that big tobacco advertising was to this other side. And now we're, again, 25, 30 years later, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I feel like I've actually had a lot of friends start smoking cigarettes just by way of like bucking the dare narrative, and it's sort of being like the whole campaign feeling a little bit like purist, like holier than thou, and it's viewed as, it's obviously not a hard drug, but it's viewed as sort of like a whatever. It's like I won't try to draw a parallel, but yeah, I think it's interesting. I just don't think that there's a lot of use case, at least from my perspective. Maybe my European friends, but like people who are like smoking like a pack a day and are like 26, using Zins as like an alternative to like an existing nicotine addiction in the US, I will say.
Do you seriously know people your age who smoke a pack a day?
Yes, from Eastern Europe.
I guess that kind of makes sense. But I was just in France, and, a pack of cigarettes cannot, like, you can go in and say like, I want to buy a pack of Dunhills, and it'll be the shape of a box of Dunhills, but it doesn't, and it says Dunhill at one end, but everything else on that box says smoking kills. Mm-hmm. Smoking will cause cancer. Smoking causes birth defects. Mm-hmm. It's hard. And then I was in Portugal, and the warnings are not nearly as dire. And I don't know if the warnings even exist on packaging in Eastern Europe.
And I was about to say, Portugal has a whole different approach to like drug policy too over there, like, dating back like 20 years or something like that. So,
yeah. And also I just had a friend in Turkey. He sent me a photo of a pack of cigarettes. He's not a smoker. He did it for novelty, I guess, that he bought, and it had like the teeth, like the decaying teeth, and like instead, in place of a label, it was that. And he was kind of like, haha, that's ridiculous. And just like moved on. I think though that like the shame, like with Dare and like I remember I like signed on to some pledge and you get like free pizza or something, like with sort of like the ethos, or maybe it's the pathos of Dare and like staying drug free and whatnot is just, it's like abstinence only sex education. It just, it doesn't work so well.
And we're not here to try and be scolds either. Like,
right.
Again, like I think that's the wrong approach. It's the same thing you're seeing with all these reviews that come out about alcohol consumption, and it's linked to various forms of cancer. Like, we are, we have tried to be a dry country. We are admittedly a wet country. Like,
we live in a society.
We live in a society, but it's like, okay, so everything in moderation. You were trying to look up earlier, like, oh, can you buy Zyn if you're 18? You're looking at the package, and it's like the Surgeon General's warning is there. So it's like, yeah, what sort of latitude are they going to get with this new FDA extension on marketing capabilities? Whereas people are still like, oh yeah, I know that that's nicotine. I know that they're still going to be running the risk for oral cancers, esophageal, and people have to make and choose their own decisions. I just think it puts public health officials in a different situation, not a difficult one, but a different one.
Yeah. And the US doesn't typically do harm reduction very well. But yeah, Matt, and to your point, I think people are going to find a way to do substances no matter what.
Yeah. They will look, people like Jerry said, man, people want to alter their consciousness.
I think it's a pretty good place that we can end up here as two deadheads and Bella. We can rename the podcast that. But yeah, I want to be able to tap into that as part of the conversation. So I really appreciate both of your insights here, and appreciate you, the listener, for bearing with us as we went through all things. And I hope we didn't come off as scolds. I don't think that we did. So I think that's a good place to wrap this episode. This has been the MM+M podcast. We'll be back in your podcast feeds next week with a very exciting guest right ahead of the World Cup final. So keep an eye out for that. And in the meantime, take care.
The MM+M podcast is produced by Jack O'Brien, Lesha Bushak, Steve Madden, Jamison Fleming, Bella Chakowski, Bill Fitzpatrick, and Gordon Thaler, with additional production by Lola Offenbach and Julia Ramada. Listen, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts.